Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another video. Apple just wrapped up their WWDC keynote for 2020. They announced a bunch of things and let's go over them. So first up, we had iOS 14. So cool callouts here are widgets on the home screen, app library, iMessage mentions, iMessage, thread replies, and a few other things packed in there. So they'll cue the video right now actually. And you can see we have these legitimate stacked up widgets on your home screen. You can move them around. There's different sizes. Super cool. App libraries are very similar to folders, but they're basically so you don't forget what's on your last few pages of your home screen. As they show here, we often forget what's on the later pages, so we can group them together in a library and search them in a alphabetical list. Next up, they move to the Apple Car Key. And as the name implies, we can unlock vehicles now with the Apple-enabled car key feature. We can also start the vehicle. We can share the vehicle car key over the air with different permissions. It's great for parental controls as well. First vehicle to support this is the BMW, I believe, X5 that they've got here in the video, with more to come. After this, Craig will transition to talk about iPadOS, and actually here they're showing your car key stays in Passbook along your other passes and cards. iPadOS, not too many exciting things to call out. The big one being now that calls and Siri use does not block your entire screen now. It looks like how Android has it as a little banner at the top. The next thing, which is really cool that they'll transition to here in a second, is something they're calling app clips. So now, if you ever want to use an app that you don't have installed, you can get a card prompted up from the bottom like you just saw there, and there's a bunch of things you can do with this now. So you can see these cards come up from the search menu, you can see them come up from maps, you can scan a QR code. So you can imagine if you're out in a restaurant and want to use like a particular restaurant app and you don't have it installed, you don't have to go to the App Store and download and install it. You can just use a mini clip version of it now, which is pretty dang cool. You can also use NFC. You can use QR codes like I mentioned as you're showing here. So very cool paradigm. I think this is going to evolve quite a bit. And moving on after app clips, if we give this a second here, looks like Apple's keynote decided to be slow. We had the Apple Watch. So the Apple Watch had some really cool announcements. So we have one of their execs here talking about how there are a ton of apps for the watch. The first cool thing that they started talking about in watchOS 7, I believe, was sleep tracking. That might have been the second thing. The first thing we'll see here actually is watch face sharing. So this is pretty cool, where if you have a particular watch face you like, you can share it with other people. If there are particular complication apps that are needed by that watch face, you'll be prompted to download those apps. And it's more of a customization feature to a thing on the Apple Watch that's already very customizable. So definitely a welcome change. And I believe after this, they transitioned to more of the health-related updates. The one they're going to announce after this, I believe, was dancing coming to the workouts and activity app. So right now you can track things like running, swimming, and all things like that. Here they actually also went over maps, so you can see that maps look better now. They also included bicycling routes, which is pretty cool for all of you guys that like to bike around your neighborhood, city, or town. And anyways, back to the workout stuff. So they transitioned here, and she's going to show us that all of these things are currently supported, but they brought dancing to the mix. And what's pretty cool in particular about this is it uses things like the accelerometer and gyroscope to basically figure out what your heart rate is, what your motion is, if you're dancing, what you're doing. And here they have some videos and stills to kind of depict how it's under the hood working. And it's right there in your workouts app. And the next thing they transitioned in here is that they've redesigned the workout and activity app on your iPhone as well. They've got a nicer design, more information surface, which is always a welcome change. Next up, we had sleep tracking, which is not surprising whatsoever. This comes on the heels of Apple's acquisition of a sleep tracking company. Super exciting. A lot of people are going to love this. opens up a lot of new possibilities for the developer community. I'm particularly interested myself. So we have her here talking about something called wind down. Basically, once you are close to your bedtime, your watch will basically tell you that it's time to go to sleep. It'll dim your screen, maybe turn on night shift. If you've got home kit accessories like lights, it could dim the lights as well. And what's cool is your Apple Watch, of course, can wake you up as well, as we'll see in a second here. It'll tell you how many hours of sleep you got. It'll give you a nice little friendly greeting of good morning. So we see 6 a.m. wake up time here. And we've got our good morning. We've got how many hours of sleep we got. We got some quality metrics in there. So all around pretty cool things. Next up, we had coverage of the new macOS. So the new macOS is called macOS Big Sur, which is an interesting name. Apple's always going out with their names. And if I'm being honest, it wasn't too feature packed. They definitely had some things, but I think the biggest thing that I noticed was it's a really nice visual design. So they queued up a video here, which was kind of bittersweet because these are generally Johnny Ive videos, and you'll see it in a second after Craig is done talking about design. And in the video, they had their designer, and his name is escaping me right now, but typical Apple fashion black and white video we've got going here when you would hear, the iconic Johnny Ive voice talking about aluminium. But here we have them queuing up their video, and something they focused on is continuity of design. So using the same SF symbols found on iPhone, iPad, your watch. So things look really nice with shadows, colors, dark mode support. Your content really pops. There's no unnecessary controls all over the place. And your sounds are all similar to the iOS sounds for messages, mail, and all that good stuff. But they also managed to retain a bit of the Mac's own personality with something familiar, but not drowning out the history of the macOS operating system. So here they had macOS, and Craig ran through some desktop applications. So right here he's going to pull up Mail if I remember correctly. So Mail, you'll see, is very similar to what we had before. So actually, it goes through some photos. There's Mail. So Mail is very similar to what we had before. The things to note out are the icons being colored, and they're all the same. I mean, they're not, like I said, they're not major changes. It's a new design language. You'll notice that images and things really pop. So this next announcement with Tim here was actually really big. So they talked about their move from the Intel chip to their own custom Apple chips. So Apple Silicon based on ARM processors for their Mac computers, which is a major change. Doesn't really impact consumers too much yet, but for the developer community, this is major. So Apple's been perfecting their chip design over the past several years, and they're going to transition to their supposed secret bunker lab right here in Apple Park, where their headquarters is. There's really cool animation. This definitely has to not be real, but who knows? So they had their Svp of Hardware Engineering here talk a lot about what this means and what the support looks like, and he'll run through some numbers. And I think they'll show it here, but if memory serves, it's 100 times faster as far as the CPU is concerned. So that's their A series of chips. He's talking about the history here. There's that 100x, which is pretty wild to think about. They talk about how these chips are used in both iPhones and iPads today, all the A series Bionic and all those crazy chip names that they have. The GPU power is 1000x, which is also mind-boggling. They've kind of left Intel and both AMD in the dust when it comes to this. As some of you may know, they actually design the chips but don't manufacture them. The manufacturing process is done by an outsourced company called TSMC. I believe it's a Taiwanese company, if I'm not mistaken. And here they're talking about Universal 2, which is a new packaging standard for these apps that we now need to support with Intel and both the ARM processors. They went through Microsoft and Adobe, who had early access to using Universal 2 to basically now allow applications like PowerPoint, Excel, Word, the Adobe suite of applications to not only run on the Intel-based Macs, but the newer one as well. You can imagine that's a really big concern. Once the new chips roll out, we want to make sure that the old software is both compatible backwards and on the new architecture. So here Craig is just going through things like Excel and Word and making sure the things are working, and also kind of demonstrating that everything is super fluid. And if I'm being completely honest, I was really impressed, particularly by the editing software that he's going to go through here. Here, I think we've got Illustrator, and then he shows up some Photoshop goodness. And he's going to actually jump into Final Cut Pro in a second here. And he'll go over running full ProRes, 4K, actually 8K if I'm not mistaken, videos side by side, which is absolutely wild. So here we've got Photoshop and showing off the detail and the fluidity, and here we've jumped into Final Cut Pro, and he's showing how you can render this. There's no choppiness, you can add effects very, very easily. It looks really professional. And here he's going to have these 3 clips side by side. He talks about how they use their neural engine to perfect a lot of the power management, how under the hood things are really in line between now the hardware, the chip, and the software that they write and ship themselves. So it gives them full control of the supply chain, which is definitely pretty cool. So he goes a bit on and on about it. Definitely a big moment. I think they could have made this part a little bit shorter, since it's not really a consumer conference, but still interesting. So here they talked about Rosetta, which is a way for applications on Mac to both run on Intel and on the new Apple custom chip architecture, which is not too interesting to call out for most people. And that is where they ended things. So I know I've been rambling this whole video, so hopefully it was a lot of material. You guys caught wind of everything you think is exciting. Thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, hit that like button down below, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.